Hi, and welcome to my OCR A-Level Biology revision session with me, Christine. So today's lesson I want to look at ecosystems. So what's an ecosystem? Well, an ecosystem is a community of living organisms, your plants, your animals, your microorganisms, and how they're interacting with their physical environment, the air, the water, and soil. So things like the concentration of carbon dioxide, oxygen, the temperature, the pH, these are all things that are going to be in their physical environment that these living organisms are going to be reacting with. So when we split an ecosystem up, we look at it with regards to the abiotic factors, the non-living factors, and then the biotic factors, the living components. And these can have an effect on where we find different organisms. So ecosystems actually range in size. They are so dynamic and can change over time due to either natural processes like our seasons, or it can be due to human activity. Well, if we look at a rock pool, for example, that's going to change when the tide comes in and when the tide goes out. So the size of that ecosystem is going to be changing depending on those natural processes. So ecosystems play a critical role in supporting the biodiversity, the variety of living organisms within the area, and also for providing services which are essential for our survival. And we'll look more at that in the population sustainability module a bit later on. So what kind of factors are going to affect the distribution, for example, of plants? Well, the first one would be water. Water we know is a universal solvent, and we know because of transpiration that it's going to move up through the plants and then it's going to be used through the process of photolysis when the plant is photosynthesizing. So therefore, water is a factor that will affect the distribution of a plant. If there's not enough water, that's not going to be able to carry the necessary minerals up the plant for the production of chlorophyll. It's not going to allow for photolysis to occur, and therefore that will cause a problem for plants to grow. So we might not find some plants in areas where the water is low unless they are adapted to survive in that area. So things like they may be storing the water, such as cacti. It may be that the seeds that have been produced will remain dormant until there is either enough water or less water, depending on the plant. And also they may have a short life cycle. Now, light obviously is needed for photosynthesis for the light dependent reaction. And if there's low light levels, the growth and the completion of the life cycle will happen in the early part of the year. If there is a high light intensity, that could result in, again, adaptations where you find plants that have dense spines or white hairs to reflect light. So the factors are going to affect the distribution, but also plants will need to adapt to be able to survive in some of these areas. Now, temperature is obviously going to have an effect on enzyme function that therefore will affect the rate of growth and also reproduction. Edaphic soil pH, for example, most prefer a pH of 6.5 to 7. Nutrients are easily available, or it may be to do with the salt content. If there is too much salt, that's going to make it difficult for plants to take up water and those minerals that were needed for the chlorophyll production, for the amino acid production. So it's important that you understand that the soil factors are not just about those mineral nutrients, it's also about the salinity and the pH. So what they will do when they're looking at questioning you on this is linking it to, do you understand that the salt content will have an effect on the osmotic potential and therefore that movement of these substances through? Do you understand that the nutrients are needed for growth? So if you have nutrient-rich soil, many plants are going to be found there. If it's nutrient-poor soil, you're only going to have plants that are, again, adapted to survive. So for example, the Venus flytrap is adapted to survive in nutrient-poor soils because it produces enzymes enzymes that are able to break down any of the flies that are trapped. The pH being a key indicator of the nutrients being available, but also linking to enzyme function. So a lot of the time, what they'll do is they will give you an example where they're expecting you to apply your knowledge to why these factors would affect that distribution of, for example, the plants. So let's look at the distribution of animals then. What factors are going to affect this distribution? Water again. Why water? Well, there's so many things. It's a transport medium. It's a habitat for some animals. It's a source of oxygen when we look at the fish and we look at the gills. It's a way in which we can heat up or cool down because of the water properties in the fact that it has a high specific heat capacity. It's a source of food for filter feeders. It's for drinking. Food supply, that's going to affect where we find the animals. Plants, obviously, or prey, and their distribution will affect where we find the animals that feed on the plants or the animals that become the prey for the consumers. So we have that energy storage, the food supply for hibernation. So for example, if there is, right now we're in winter here in the season of our winter, and what we have is that the leaves are being dropped. We've got a lot of leaf litter and it's getting very cold. Well, what I've been noticing is the squirrels have been taking all the seeds that have been falling off the trees and they've been putting them away and hiding them in a place ready for when we get to spring. So energy storage, if an organism is going to be hibernating, that food supply, where you locate them, they will be finding that food so that they can store it away so that they can then go off for that hibernation. So that's going to affect where the distribution of animals are. Temperature always comes into, well, remember you've got your ectotherms. They rely on that external temperature for their metabolism. So the temperature is going to affect where you find ectotherms. Also, it influences your enzymes. And then animals are able to move around. They will migrate, they will hibernate, they will adapt in the fact that they may have really large surface areas or very small surface areas. So that's linking back to your homeostasis module. So whenever they give you a question about ecosystems, they will expect you to interlink that knowledge that you have. Now, territory is a prime factor that's going to affect the distribution of animals because we tend to have hierarchical structures within a population. So that is going to affect where you will find the different distributions of animals based on this territory is mine, not yours. There'll be competition. There'll be space needed for breeding and feeding and hunting and hibernating. So this is a factor that's going to affect that distribution. And then we have those breeding sites. They need to be rich for the feed. So they need to have that way of getting the energy source. They could be water. It could be a place where they lay eggs. It may be that it needs to be dark and protected. It could be that it has to be a very specific temperature. So all of these different factors are going to affect the distribution of animals. And that is why ecosystems vary in size and also are dynamic because they are constantly changing over time. So remember, when they look at a question on this, they will be expecting you to pull all the knowledge of the topic areas together. So I hope you've liked this video, and if you have, then please do subscribe and click on the button. Also, do check out my revision platform, www.aiqchat.com.